So this is the first lecture burst that's going to go with Chapter 11, Groups and Individuals. And so just to start, I usually do group work in class, but I really just want you thinking about what kinds of groups you belong to. Maybe your top 3 groups. So think about that for a minute, even if you have to pause this and think about that. Because the next, I want you to understand, why are you in those groups, right? How close are those groups? So what purpose does the group serve? Like, why do you want to be in it, or why are you a part of it? How close-knit is the group, or isn't it? What did you have to do to get into the group, if anything? How do others view this group of yours? And what's your role in the group? And if you think about the various groups that you're in, these can all look very different. All may be categorized as a group, which we're going to talk about the different elements that make up a group, but they can look very different, and your role in each may be very different. The role of the group in society may be different, and how the members of the group operate can be very different. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about within this chapter. Now, there are costs and benefits to being in a group. Definitely, self-knowledge is a benefit. We learn who we are and who we'd like to become when we're in a group. And being a member of that group can become part of our identity. So it's not surprising that we don't easily leave groups behind that we're a part of. Groups can also help our self-esteem. They help to enhance our status and hence our self-esteem, because as our status goes up, so does our self-esteem. For example, if you were to be accepted into a prestigious school, both your status and your self-esteem would be enhanced. So we think of self-enhancement as one element of this, a goal where our public image and feelings of superiority might be raised. People seeking self-enhancement are going to place a great deal of importance on the group's status, and then they're going to also strongly identify with that group. Self-transcendence is another aspect of benefit of the group, and this is where a goal we have is maybe to assist others. So to transcend ourselves. It's not all about us. I know that's a hard concept to understand for most of us in this very me-centered society that we're in right now. But, people may have this goal where they want to assist others. We just finished talking about pro-social behavior. We can understand that. The status of the group here is less important for those seeking self-transcendence. So if you're seeking self-enhancement, the status of the group is greater. If you're seeking self-transcendence, not so much. And also, groups can bring about social change. We can do much more as a group when it comes to driving social change than we can as just mere individuals, even though sometimes it may take a distinct individual or a leader, as we're going to look at, to drive a group or get others in a group to be cohesive and affect change together. That change often doesn't come without all the members of the group contributing. Think about any huge social reform or social change that's been done. If we go all the way back to the days of slavery, you can see how, yes, Abraham Lincoln played a pivotal role, but it really was a whole party of people that were against slavery that brought about that social change. Okay? We think about Martin Luther King with the rights of African Americans, right? How that he was a leader and he helped lead the charge, but many people demonstrated and protested and brought about that change. So those are definite benefits. Costs of being in a group, it does cost some, right? It's going to restrict your personal freedom. There's obviously some things you can't do when you belong to a group because you need to subscribe to the ideals and the maybe restrictions that that group puts on you. And it may demand your time and your resources being a part of that group, right? If you're an athlete and you're a part of a team, you have to give of your time and you have to give of your talent and resources that you have to contribute to the team. And it may also cost you having to embrace a policy or a position that you disapprove of, right? If we think about being a Republican or a Democrat, usually you're part of that party because you embrace the policies of that party, but not always. There's definitely things that Democrats don't always support that their fellow Democrats do, and vice versa for Republicans. So there may be a particular policy where you're like, wow, I just don't see eye to eye with those members of my party or my group. However, I still consider myself a Republican or Democrat. So sometimes they may have to forego their own individual approval to go along with what the group is promoting. So let's look at some basic features of a group. The first being cohesiveness. And obviously, we can understand this in terms of some different aspects of the group, like size and such. But we think of cohesiveness as the extent to which members of a group are connected. And this social concept called entitativity, actually, I know that's a hard word to say, so I've phonetically spelled it out. Entitativity is really the connectedness amongst members of a group, which makes the group cohesive. Okay. The higher the status, the more cohesive a group, the more costs that are involved to enter the group, like it takes a lot to get into the group, the more cohesive a group is going to be. If there's internal threats to the group, external threats to the group, like others threaten the group, this is going to increase commitment to the group. Smaller groups will be cohesive, more so than larger groups, because its members can get to know one another much better. And so entitativity is the extent to which that group is seen as a coherent entity. And that's where that term comes from. Okay. And we can use the military as a good example here, right? Groups who are high in entitativity have members who interact with one another frequently, like as in the military. When you join and you sign up, you're interacting with one another frequently. The group is seen as important to its members. There's some degree of sacrifice that goes into the group, and it's important for the person's identity and self-concept. And members of the group share the same goals and outcomes, oftentimes in the military. And there's a lot of similarity in significant ways. And those are just some elements that increase entitativity. And I use the military as an example, but you can think of maybe groups that you belong to where this is the case. And so there may be shared intimacy, history, or background that enhances the cohesiveness of the group or cohesion. And different group members serve different functions as per the individual needs and strengths of the group. We are not simply in a group, right? We become a part of it. Sometimes we're just in a group. And these may be very loose groups or groups that don't mean a lot to you. You're not embedded within that group. But most of the time, if we're in a group, we become much a part of it. Think about religious groups. They have a high level of cohesion because their members share a belief that's really central to the group. It has great importance for their life. It's not just, oh, we're going to follow these rules and regulations. It's, I really truly believe in this. This is an inherent sense of who I am. this belief that I have in a higher power, whatever the religion is a strong element which ties its members together. Members of a group often play different roles. So roles are a different feature of a group. Some roles are assigned from the beginning, right? You're going to be the leader of the group. You're going to be the scribe. Maybe you've done a classroom project and someone was the writer, the scribe, someone was the dictator or spoke, and you had different roles, right? And some roles gradually develop over time. That might be the case in a job situation. Maybe as you acquire skills, your role within your job changes, right? Sometimes you start out as a hostess working in a restaurant or a cashier, and maybe you work your way up to a server or bartender. You're still part of the same group, but your roles gradually develop over time and usually with experience. People also tend to internalize their group roles. They take them seriously, right? They make them part of their self-concept. It helps define who they are. So roles can be a very powerful influence on behavior. We really start to play the part that we see ourselves as having in a group with regards to our role within that group. Status is another feature of a group. It can be used to influence the behavior of group members. So you follow the rules in a group, you get rewarded, right? There's rewards for obedience and conformity, as we've seen. Sometimes that rewarding is happening on an operant conditioning basis or a classically conditioned basis. But nonetheless, it affects how we behave. So status makes a difference. Those with high status are less conforming than those with low status. Okay? If you're a higher status, you can kind of do what you want. You have more of a higher position. You have more power. When you're a lower status, you're kind of at the whim of the group. Think about alpha males in a baboon troop and subordinate male monkeys. You know, those who are alphas and who are at the top of the chain, they get away with a lot more. They get the cream of the crop in terms of mates, in terms of food supply. And those who are lower status kind of have to take what's dished out to them. So these are linked to several key aspects of the self-concept and have important implications for psychological well-being to the extent that people internalize those roles, right? Which we just talked about. Enacting a role well can lead people to see that their behavior reflects in sort of like, as Maslow would say, authentic self. So when actors take on a role, think about acting, that more closely reflects their true self, they report enjoying the role more and engaging it more. They can identify it. One good example might be Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. He really got into that role, and it was speculated that the role really dug into the core of him and hit him kind of hard, which may have been linked to his later suicide, which is all theory, of course, but that's what some have said. So follow the rules of those in power and you will be rewarded, right? High status people enjoy many advantages. And from an evolutionary perspective, that really makes sense because those with higher status have increased access, again, to resources that promote reproductive success and survival of the fittest and all of that. Even things like height seem to be a factor, how tall you are. Taller males tend to lead companies. Isn't that an interesting statistic? And some of this can be enhanced through intimidation or acting in a threatening manner. When you have higher status, you can use intimidation to your benefit. Okay, we're going to stop right there and I will continue on the next lecture burst.